Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of our Fiscal Committee for Tuesday, April 2nd. I'd like to welcome everybody here in Carnegie and all those watching on CityLink. First order of business is the approval of our minutes from our meeting held on February 5th.
So moved, Aguilar.
Second, Jamison.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passed unanimously. All righty. We have one agenda item today, and that is pension plan design changes. And we've been a busy committee over the last more than a year from what I remember of the history. And last fall there were elections inside of our city unions that approved our going to the South Dakota retirement system. It took action by the state legislation, and now we're going to have some more ordinances that we're going to have to pass in order to make all this come together. And Mr. Bill O'Toole, the Director of Human Resources, is going to fill us in on all the details.
Thank you, Councilor. Bill O'Toole, Director of Human Resources. I appreciate the opportunity to come to you. You're exactly right. This is the result of about 2.5, almost 3 years worth of work leading up to this point. We're thrilled to be where we are today. What I'd like to do is kind of walk you through a high-level review, introduce you to those ordinances that we do need to implement in order to put into place the recommendations that have been made. And what I'd like to do is just start first with a quick review. The City Council and the Mayor adopted a resolution in 2012 in the fall. It was Council Resolution 5212, providing guidance for the employee pension changes affecting current and future employees. Those were the two groups of employees that we targeted for savings, and there were specific recommendations that were made that we'll be talking about today as it relates to each of those respective groups. For the current employees, if you will remember, there were kind of two major components. We dealt with employee contribution levels and the health care. And what we were pursuing is a recommendation to increase pension contributions by 1% in 2014 and 1% in 2015 for a 2% total contribution increase on behalf of the employees moving forward. The other piece of the equation was in dealing with the health care issues that were present, instead of having access to the city's self-insured health plan, instead the third bullet there is for those employees retiring after December 31st, 2013, provide a flat dollar stipend to purchase individual policies in lieu of access to the health plan. And as Councilor Karski mentioned, under current state law and under current city ordinance, before we can make any change to an employee benefit like this, it did require a vote of the membership. We went through that process, and I'm pleased to report that the voting results, as you already all know, maybe the folks at home do not know, is it was overwhelmingly approved by the Employees Retirement System by 87%, and the Firefighters Pension Fund was 97% approval rate. So we were pleased with that. I think that was very indicative of the employees' position that they wanted to be part of the solution as we move forward. The next piece dealt with the future employees. And the recommendation for future employees was to allow those future employees hired after June 30th, 2013 to become members of the South Dakota retirement system. This was a policy position for the city to take. It actually didn't require a vote of the membership for this proposal. However, it did require change to South Dakota law in order for it to allow it. And I'd like to thank, just take a moment and thank Rob Wiley, the Executive Director of the South Dakota Retirement System, and Jackie Storm, who did an awful lot of work helping us prepare that legislative agenda for the legislature. And we're pleased to report that after a few trips to Pier and through some of their assistance and leadership, we were effectively able to get that through and get the support of the legislature, and the governor signed that legislation so that we're ready to move with that particular issue. So We got the employees' approval with respect to changes affecting them. We've got the legislator support for the future employees, and now it kind of brings it back home to the local level, and we're looking for local legislation to implement those changes for those current and future employees. I also want to let you know that our office has worked very closely with the legal team, Gail Easland, who's the legal advisor to the pension boards, in developing these proposals that you're going to see in just a moment. And again, just to recap, there's basically three very obvious and significant changes: employee contributions for current employees, the changes in the health care, and then, of course, move into SDRS for future employees. And the way the ordinance is set up, it's in Chapter 39. All of these changes will be found in Chapter 39, but there are two specific changes that you'll find in the Employees Retirement System that'll cover the general and police employees, and the Firefighters Pension Fund to cover those for the firefighters. And again, just a really high-level look at this, and we'll answer any questions that you might have about this. And for those that may be at home, the underlined is new language, and that's in blue, and the strike-through language is deletion, and that is in red. And again, I'll try to keep this at a high level, starting with the Employees Retirement System in Section 39.222. What we're doing here is defining when we hire an individual, will they be in the state retirement system or the city pension plan? And basically what Section 1, 3, and 4 are telling you is that if we're going to hire somebody and they're going to be in the city's pension plan, they need to be hired prior to July 1st, 2013. So that's what those sections are representing there. Subsection B in that area, this one really doesn't have anything to do with the proposals, as it is kind of a house cleaning measure. What we tried to do in B, that's dealing with in cases of determination whether or not a person needs to belong to the police division or the employees retirement system, you vest that responsibility with the human resources director instead of the board. For some reason, the firefighters pension fund has it vested with the HR director, but the employees had it vested with the pension board, and we just wanted to sync that up. We thought it made a great deal of sense as an administrative function. And of course, in C, this is the section that deals with employees that are hired or appointed after July 1st, 2013, the enabling language to send them to the South Dakota retirement system. In Section 39.223, this is simply a provision, again, setting the parameters that if somebody who had happened to depart from the City of Sioux Falls had prior service, if they then became reemployed prior to July 1st, 2013, they could buy back prior service. Obviously, this doesn't apply for a very significant period of time, but we felt it was necessary to add that ceiling in that equation. And now on to Section 39.248 in subsection B. This is dealing with the employee contribution levels. And you can see up above the first insertion, effective January 6, 2014, increasing the general member contribution to 4%, and then in January 5th, 2015, increasing it to 5%, and somewhat the same thing down below for the police officers, moving it from 8 to 9% and effectively from 9 to 10% in 2015. The next issue that you'll see up here under the group insurance side of the equation, the health insurance in 39.258, there's a deletion. Again, this is going to be another house cleaning measure. It's just something we identify as being unnecessary, and as long as we were here, we were going to clean it up. Same is true in subsection B. We're just eliminating or prepayment plan. Again, just something that we don't believe is necessary. And then in C, here again, we're identifying who's eligible for participation in the city's self-insured health plan. What we're saying is that you need to retire prior to January 1st, 2014 if you're going to have eligibility to participate in the city's health insurance plan. And then the next insertion of the new provision in 39.258 That's the insertion of the language dealing with the stipend as opposed to having access to the city's self-insured health plan. We think it's pretty specific. It simply addresses that anyone hired somebody who retires after December 31st, 2013 will receive the monthly stipend instead of having access to the health plan. And of course, consistent with the provisions, it talks about then the level of $40 per month per year of service and ending at Medicare eligible age or death, and that the stipend will be adjusted for inflation starting in January 2015. The sentence below that about credited service just gets to the issue of how we calculate that service, and basically what we're saying is we're going to do it the same manner as we do for the pension. So when we go to determine the value of the stipend based on your service, it's consistent. And as we get into anything beyond 39.307 now, we're now moving on into the firefighters pension fund. And for all intents and purposes, you're going to see the exact same changes now in the firefighter section that you just saw in the employees retirement system. I won't spend a lot of time with that. It may look a little bit different, but for the most part, it's the same language, just transposing into the relevant sections in the fire fund. I might have got ahead of myself on there a little bit. Again, composition of membership is laid out a little bit different in the fire section than it is the employee section, but it's dealing with the same things, identifying that those that are hired prior to July 1st will remain in the city plan. Those hired after July 1st participate in South Dakota retirement system. Same thing with respect to termination of membership. The only opportunity to buy back prior service if you come back to the City of Sioux Falls is if you're hired prior to July 1st in 39.308. In section 39.325, the pension savings fund, that section is also addressing the contribution levels of the employees, identifying that indeed their contribution rates will be increasing by 1% starting January 6, 2014, by 1%, taking it to 9%, and then again on January 5th, 2015, another percent, taking it to 10% at that point in time. Similar provisions and deletions, if you will, in the group insurance deduction for the firefighters on that prepayment. Again, just some unnecessary language that we're recommending be deleted. And also in Section C, identifying that only those folks that retire prior to January 1st, 2014 would be eligible for participation in the city's current self-insured plan. And again, the new section at 39.345 on the stipend, the exact same language for the firefighters, identifying that level and the time frames of who's eligible for that. I know that was very quick. It is our intention, with your approval, that what we would do is recommend these exact ordinances, of which you have a copy, for first reading on April 16th and second reading on May 7th. And that would allow us, obviously, adequate time to meet the time frames that we're trying to accomplish with the objectives. And I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have on these proposals.
Questions, Councilor Jameson?
Bill, thank you for all your work on this, and I know it's been a lot of work, and you've been very successful in your leadership here to get this through, and you've done a fine job. On the, just one question, on the first section, the 39.222, section 4, item B, the changing it to the HR director.
Yes.
From the pension board. Have you collaborated with the pension board and received their kind of endorsement or support?
We provided a copy of these ordinances, gosh, was it the last pension board meeting? At the February meeting. They've all seen this information.
Are they concerned about it? Is it a big deal? Is it anything to worry about?
No, I don't think it was anything. And again, they were told the same thing here, is that for some reason the firefighter section vested that responsibility with the HR director, but the employees didn't. And again, we see that as an administrative function. Right now, if there was an issue with respect to a question regarding membership, I'd be going to them anyway, explaining to them what happened, what the facts are, what I believed was the appropriate move, and then they would act. So I don't think there's any objection on behalf of the board. We have not heard anything about that.
Other questions? I have one, if I may. Under the 39.258-1, the stipend for health insurance, will that stipend be provided? That's strictly going to be for the employees under the old pension plan. It will not include new hires after July 1st, is that correct?
That is correct. Any employee that goes to the South Dakota retirement system will not be eligible for the stipend.
Okay.
In essence, becomes an issue for them, like many, to plan accordingly for their future needs.
Okay. And then the second part of the exact same section, it's a 3% flat. It's not indexed for inflation. It's
The 3% is flat. It's not indexed in any way, shape, or form, but yet an amount to account for some level of inflation.
okay. I believe we're looking for a motion to send this to the full council for first reading on April 16th.
Mr. Chair, one more question if I
Yes,
could.
sir.
In this group, with the fiscal group, as well with Bill here, the ending of the current employees and the fact that the new employees won't be helping to fund that pension. Have we figured out, should we be thinking, have you thought about a method to budget for that when it occurs? Is there any additional planning now that we need to start to?
I think I understand where you're going, Counselor, and yeah, that issue was something the board was very cognizant of. It was something the actuary, the consultants that we hired to help us with this study were very cognizant of in that process. And it was all factored in terms of identifying what are those costs going to be, how is that going to impact our future moving forward. You know, fortunately for us, our pension plans are extremely well funded. So the timing was very good as it relates to those kinds of issues. You know, we were upwards of almost 90% funded. So we had almost 90% cash to meet all of our liabilities, which mitigated that to an extent, but that was a legitimate issue in terms of how that plays out. But it was all factored in the analysis and was absolutely considered.
So the idea, tell me when the table turns, when it really gets expensive for us, how many years down the road is that?
Well, actually, it's not an issue. There's what the actuary told us is you might see an initial uptick in cost as you make this transition, but then there'll be the slow, gradual savings over time.
Savings, right. But I mean, maybe I'm missing something here. I'm just under the impression that the cost of the plan for the current employees is going to be very expensive later on because we haven't added any new employees to the plan.
Not necessarily, and again, actually that'll work out because again, what you're funding for is the gap between what you have in cash and that future liability for that group of employees who is now closed.
Okay.
So you know that there's nobody else coming in, and you need to figure out and work with your actuarial assumptions to figure out how do I fund for that liability for the future moving forward. And that's all been looked at. We kind of understand what that's going to be. That was all part of that process in saying, you know, we realized there might be, that, like I said, this initial uptick in cost, but ultimately long-term significant savings. You know, you've all heard it before that came from the report that the savings identified with both of these measures over the next 3 years is, you know, just north of about $300 million. So they are significant. I thought you were going to ask me when do we see it turn around. You know, I'm not that exact in terms of the science and when we'll start seeing that, but I think relatively soon, but slow. Again, you're dealing with a pension plan. It's a long-term issue that we're dealing with, but some major accomplishments and major victories as it relates to this. And there's just been a host of people involved in this process, and we've just been very grateful for the support of the council and the mayor, the pension boards, and multiple staff members throughout in the South Dakota retirement system. They've been great to work with.
Short story is that our current pension plan is pretty near fully funded, and we should not, barring some catastrophe, not have much to worry about with the current plan.
I think that's fair to say, Counselor, that, like I said, the timing was actually pretty good to consider taking this action. Yes, there was a concern expressed about the lost new revenue coming in, but we think we're sitting very good.
Do we have any numbers tied to this as far as savings over the next 20, 30 years, what this will mean to the city? Do we have an idea of that?
Yes, as I was saying before, you know, collectively, the estimates that the actuary that we hired to help us with this process, the numbers, it was right around $314 million savings over the next 30 years regarding the savings that we just talked about with respect to these ordinance proposals.
All righty. Other questions, comments from the committee?
I move that we move this up to the council.
Second.
April 16th. Okay, we have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Looks like it's unanimous. We will see this on April 16th before the full council. I have open discussion as my next agenda item. I think this committee has pretty much very few agenda items left anymore, so might be kind of light duty for us for the next few months. So any open discussion? Councilor Jameson.
I would add a thought to the committee that perhaps we might recommend if we deem it necessary, but on the regular agenda for the council meetings, the contracts for the approval for contracts that we do under the consent agenda. You know, we lost a lot of blood trying to get that ordinance passed, and I just sense that sometimes we don't look at those like we really should. I'm just wondering if we should have Dave Bixler or somebody print those out each week for our council meetings so that they're a part of it. Forces us to look at it. It seems kind of shameful to ask, but I do my best to look at them, but certainly there's been meetings where I've not. And the detail that's in those are pretty brief. And I just don't want us to give up on all that extra work that we went through and the whole purpose behind it. And so I don't know if there's any value to that with the other counselors, but that's just a thought.
I see some head nodding. Any other input on that? And I think it'd be a wise use of Dave Bixler, a good resource for us. And I'm like you, Councilor Jameson. Most of the time, I do get a chance to look at them, and you know, that's why they're there for us. But I don't know. I can't speak obviously for the rest of the council, so I think it would be a good idea to include that as part of our papers that we get.
Okay, good.
So just kind of direction for our from the fiscal committee to Mr. Bixler, who basically answers to this committee for the benefit of the whole council. So good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, another thing, as long as you, sorry you brought that up. You know, as chair of the audit committee, we have Rich Oaksall, who really answers to the audit committee. And then we vent that all back through to the council. But, you know, with the addition of Dave Bixler and his expertise and working with the fiscal committee, I'm just wondering if there should be more of a involvement with Mr. Bixler in this committee like we have with Rich Oaksall. Maybe not to the extent that we have a charter and all that kind of stuff, but I really would like to see his involvement married better with this committee in a stronger fashion. That's just, you know, where we're guiding him maybe, and he has a to-do list, and all of us know what that list is. We all kind of, you as the chair would be in constant contact with him, and you know what I'm after? You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's...
And Dave Bixler and I have had this conversation, and we do several times a week discuss, you know, items if they should be coming to the committee, where they should be going. There's so many moving parts with his job as our budget analyst, and he's also talking to land use, whether it be facade easement, just a whole handful of other areas. But we did have him initially for, I believe, on a staff report, but we didn't have anything to report on, so we took that off the agenda for tonight. I know Dave stays very busy, and how he augers down into these numbers that we get sometimes is a benefit to us, but any suggestions, you know, on how we can make them, you know, any reports or anything like that are definitely worth considering. So if you would like to visit with me privately about how we might bring them in, that's great.
Okay, yeah, I think the idea of all of us knowing what he is doing, like you say, for land use and all those other counselors would help him probably in the management of his time and for us for accountability for his performance over his term and just to make sure he's being as effective as he can be. And I think guidance from this committee would help him do that. So, yeah, I'll visit with you off camera or privately too, but just some general thoughts.
Okay. Any other items? We will adjourn.